Hi, my name's Steve and welcome to the Seaside Allotment channel, and it's an exciting day today because I'm finally getting to plant out the tomatoes and the peppers, and I'm planting them pretty early because I'm just fed up of watering them in pots basically, and I can't be bothered with buying more compost and potting them on, so I'm getting them in the ground and we'll see how that works. I did actually plant them fairly early in the ground last year, and without all this endless potting on and on and on. Seemed to work out just fine. So the beds are cleared, so I might as well get them planted. Now I'm planting some of them in the polytunnel, and as an experiment and as a way of using my hoop tunnels, which are mainly there for autumn and winter and early spring, I'm going to use the hoop tunnels to grow chilies and peppers as well. So I'll show you what I'm doing and I'll show you as the job progresses. Now, if you follow my videos, you'll know that all the way through winter the polytunnel's been absolutely full. It's either been full of brassicas or salads basically, of some description, and I left those brassicas in for quite a long time and got very straggly and messy, but it was definitely worth it because of the really warm February that we had. All the outside brassicas went to seed really quickly. The polytunnel brassicas, despite obviously being really warm in the polytunnel, lasted quite a lot longer than the outdoor ones, and that's because those polytunnel ones were sown in September rather than July or early spring, because they were planted out in October in the polytunnel once the tomatoes had been cleared. And so they were much younger plants, so they lasted a lot longer. So that was been really useful, and it just helped with the transition to my spring planted brassicas, which have now taken over completely and they're doing really nicely, and so I don't need the stuff that's in the polytunnel. So I'll throw up some pictures that just show what the polytunnel looked like. I got it nice and cleared. I did have a few problems with greenfly, and so once I cleared the ground, there's quite a lot of greenfly on the soil. So I sprayed the soil with a pyrethium insecticide. Now I don't generally use that, and obviously I'd much rather not use it during the once I've got things growing. But just spraying the bare soil with it, I don't see that's going to be much of an issue. So hopefully it won't have killed every single greenfly. I'll still have some greenfly in the polytunnel. But hopefully it's reduced the load that those new plants are going to be exposed to, and hopefully they'll be growing nice and strongly before we get any significant pressure from those greenfly again. I will do an occasional spray with garlic solution. I've heard, and it seemed to work last year, that the greenfly didn't like that so much. And I do tend to leave the doors, as you can see behind me here, the doors open as much as I can, and so we get lots of insects in here. So we're already seeing quite a lot of hoverflies in here, and of course they love greenfly. So yeah, we're getting on. Now I'll just quickly show you the way that I'm sorting the beds out. So this is the main bed. It's going to have tomatoes at the back. It's going to have peppers and chilies down the front, and what did I do? So I cleared it, sprayed it with that pyrethium, weeded it, and then just on the surface I laid down some chicken manure pellets and some composted seaweed, and I did that not a lot, because I'm actually going to fertilise the planting holes as well, and then I'll probably use a liquid fertiliser through the season. So I'm only looking, just as the roots spread out across the whole of the bed, that there's some goodness in there. And then I've laid down this spent mushroom compost on top, and probably only about an inch of spent mushroom compost, but I'm going to put, this is quite aged, this stuff. This is probably 6 to 9 months. Yeah, probably 6 months old, and it's really well rotted down, as you can see. But I've got a new batch as well, and that is very strawy, and I figured that is going to work really nicely as a mulch to retain the water. So I'm quite pleased actually that I've got some of that, and I'll show you that now. So hopefully you can see that this is effectively composted straw to all intents and purposes, and that is a very different composition to this. So if I put the two next to each other, hopefully you can see that. And as I say, I'm pretty pleased about that because that's going to be very loose. It's going to let lots of air in, but it's going to hold moisture, I think, really well. So whilst I was preparing the beds, I decided to take the celery out, and this celery has been, well, it's been fantastic. We planted it in, I think, April last year, and by the end of May, we were taking a crop off it, and we've been continuously cropping it ever since then, right up until today, and we took a nice little harvest off it as well today. But pulling the celery out, because it's got big roots, gives me the opportunity to just show you how these beds were constructed. So they're 6-inch raised beds that are just rested straight onto the soil that was here when I put the polytunnel in, and that is a very sandy soil, very low nutrients. So I made up the beds with this mixture here, some more celery bits, and this is basically a mix of spent mushroom compost, well rotted horse manure, and green waste compost from my bins. My green waste compost was at the bottom, then there was well rotted horse manure and a couple of inches, so it's a couple of inches of green waste compost, a couple of inches of well rotted horse manure, and then 2 inches of spent mushroom compost on top, and it's sunk down a little bit, and I'm basically refilling it with another 2 inches. Yeah, and a lot of people think, because I've got the landscape fabric on the floor here, that the landscape fabric is actually underneath the beds and that these beds are only 6 inches deep. Well, they're not. The landscape fabric just comes underneath the wood and then wraps up, and so it just holds it nice and firm underneath the beds, but these beds go down as deep as the roots want to go, and because it's nice sandy soil, they do go pretty deep. So yeah, that's how it's constructed. Now, when I'm planting my tomatoes, I like to plant them into these halos. You can get them on eBay and Amazon, whatever. You just have to search halo and tomatoes probably. And this is what they look like. And basically the way you use them is you press them into the soil like that, and you water into the outer ring, and then the water drains through those little holes that penetrate deep underneath the mulch. And actually, you can see here, I'm actually mulching around them. I'll show you that later. And so the tomato itself is protected because it's growing in that hole there, so water doesn't get splashed onto the stem of the stem of the tomato. And you know, the water is in the periphery, which sort of draws the roots out into the ground around the tomato. And yeah, because the water is seeping slowly through these holes, it kind of doesn't saturate the soil, you know, in a big sort of rush. It soaks in over a few minutes, sometimes even as much as 10 minutes, which is pretty good. So they do have these holes around the outside for canes, but I use string to support my tomatoes, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that in a few minutes. Now, I have seen some people taking these off because they say that they get blocked, and so they saw them off. But I actually really like these. I think they do mean that their water gets, you know, always below the soil level and well below the mulch level. And the fact that they sometimes get blocked just means that they drain a little bit slowly, and you know, to me that's all to the good. It doesn't matter whether they drain in 1 minute or 10 minutes or half an hour or a day. The tomato plants never need more than this full outer rim worth of water in a single day, so it doesn't really matter how slowly they drain from my perspective. So you'll see probably that I've got these down the edge of the bed, but my supports, I don't know whether I'll have to see if I can get into the bed here to show you this. I can't really, but the support that they're going to hang from is this crop bar here, which is a long way out. It's sort of on the centre of the bed. So if you imagine, it's on the centre of the bed, whereas these are offset. And so I'm going to train the tomatoes at an angle up the string. And that seems to work just fine. Now when it comes to supporting tomatoes, there are loads of different ways of doing it. And last year I used string and I was really pleased with that. So I'm going to use a modified version of the string method this time. Because I'm going to leave this little bench in and the fleece just for the next few weeks, just in case we get any more frosts. I'm not going to put the string in because basically the string will get in the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a stake in, and I'm going to tie the string to the stake like that, and then I'm going to push the stake in until the string is fairly taut. Now it doesn't really matter whether the string is taut or not, but just kind of slightly more convenient if it is. It doesn't really affect the load bearing, obviously, because I'm using clips. I'll show you. These are the clips from last year, and the string just goes in that little bit there. Can you see that? So you just clip it like that, and because the string is caught in that little grip there, just like that, yeah, just works really well. And the tomato obviously goes through here, and all of the strain is then taken by the string hanging from the roof. So works good. This, just having it tied here, just stops the string flapping around a bit when the tomatoes are small. But very soon, as soon as the tomato starts to hang from that clip, obviously it provides the tension on the string. But for the first few weeks, that little stick is just providing that bit of extra tension. Now obviously, eventually, you can just take that string, that stick out if you want, because that will just hang down just nicely all on its own. Okay, so it's time to plant. So I'm digging the holes, filling them with water, but before I fill them with water, I'm putting a handful of this, and this is a mixture of really well composted horse manure and farmyard manure rather, and seaweed and chicken manure pellets with some rock dust. So it's a really nice nutritious mixture. I'm just putting one handful in the bottom and just scattering a little bit of it around the top, so you can see a little bit around the top there. Okay, so they're all in, and they're planted quite deep, and so they're quite deep down inside the halos. And last year when I did this, I was slightly concerned. I was thinking, oh gosh, look, not going to get much light and all that sort of thing. But my worries were not founded. Within probably even a week, they were out of the top of these and growing lovely. So yeah, they're all in there. Sun Gold, Red Cherry, San Marzano, if I'm pronouncing that one right, and Indigo Pear Drop. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with that. And so the sticks are all in, ready to have the strings tied in. and I don't know whether there's much else to say. I'll pop the planting dates and things like that up while I'm talking, and some pictures of the varieties in case you're not familiar with them. In fact, all of these varieties are new to me, which is no surprise since I've only been growing tomatoes for 2 years. But last year was extremely successful, so I'm very pleased with that. And I've actually got 2 extra halos because in the centre there last year I had cucumbers, but I'm doing my cucumbers different this year. They didn't really go together. The cucumbers were sprawling all over the place, and you know, I like to keep the tomatoes neat. Now in this space at the front here, I'm going to have peppers. My theory is that by the time the peppers are big enough to interfere with light levels to the tomatoes will be much bigger, and I've already will have taken the leaves off the bottoms, so they won't be lacking for any light. And then similar sort of story at the front, right at the front will go the chilies. So should be a really nice looking bed. Last year I planted strawberries down here, which was a pretty stupid thing to do, but then I was learning, still learning. So that's the end of the indoor tomatoes. I've got a few indoor tomatoes in containers in hanging baskets, and they're doing quite nicely. There's another one just a bit further down here, but apart from that, that's all the indoor tomatoes I'm doing, because I'm not really doing anything in containers. I'm sticking with stuff in the ground so far as possible this year, and so we probably won't see anything about tomatoes now, apart from an update on these, until I plant them in the ground, late May, early June, outside. And I did forget to point out that there's a 3-inch mulch on top of the ground around these tomatoes, so that is pretty good. I was quite surprised when I took the tomatoes out just how far the roots reach. They're easily sort of out to this sort of point here, so yeah, it's really worth having that nice thick mulch. What I'm planning to do though, also to encourage deep rooting, is that the plants are fairly well watered, where the pots were fairly well watered before the plants were put in the ground. I did water the planting holes, so there's a nice source of moisture below them. I gave them a tiny bit of water just to bed them in, and now I'm planning to leave them for maybe up to 10 days perhaps without watering them again, to encourage them to go deep. That's the end of this video. As I said, I'm not the most experienced tomato grower. This is only my 2nd year in the polytunnel, so I've only had 1 crop out of the polytunnel, but it was extremely productive. I basically did it like this, just we've done a few refinements this year. But I'd love some hints and tips from experienced tomato growers. Anything that you think I should have done differently, or that I could do to improve things going forward. Alright, well, with that, I'll see you soon.